You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Elevate your enterprise identity solutions with Strata. Seamlessly connect legacy apps to any identity provider, apply MFA effortlessly, and maintain identity continuity without disruptions. Strata reduces tech debt, enhances security, and provides a robust, efficient identity management system. Feel secure and efficient managing your identity infrastructure. Strata helps you streamline operations and ensure continuous identity availability. Visit strata.io/cyberwire, share your identity challenge, and receive a free set of AirPods Pro. Take control of your identity management today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. And our thanks to Strata for being a longtime friend and supporter of this podcast.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate the SpaceX transporter rideshares and how much they have transformed the entire concept of access to space for a whole host of companies and organizations? The barrier to entry for getting your payload into space has now really dropped, and as much as everyone's extremely eager for Starship, the transporter missions with the Falcon 9 have already changed things significantly. It's exciting times. Speaking of,
it absolutely is. I love the fact that you anticipate that I'm just going to throw one at you. Okay, so here it goes. How do meteors stay clean?
How do meteors stay clean? They go through a car wash. I don't know why my brain's saying car wash. I don't know. How do meteors stay clean?
They take a shower.
Oh, because of a meteor shower. It was right there. It's right there. Oh, my God. I overthought that one. I overthought it. Meteor shower.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
Today is August 16th, 2024. I'm Maria Varmazes.
I'm Alice Carruth, and this is T-minus.
SpaceX launches the Transporter 11 mission. Maxar deploys 2 WorldView Legion satellites. The ISS National Lab and NASA put out a joint call for research.
And Alicia Siegel from NSF will be bringing us the latest space traffic report, taking a look at the space launch news from the week that's been and a look ahead at the week to come.
Happy Friday, everybody. Let's dive into our briefing for today. And we are kicking off with a very recent launch update. Falcon 9 carrying 116 payloads for the Transporter 11 mission lifted off earlier from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Transporter 11, as the name might suggest, is SpaceX's 11th dedicated smallsat rideshare mission. These rideshare missions have transformed the space industry, and this one has carried 116 new satellites to low Earth orbit. The payloads on this flight include CubeSats, microsats, and an orbital transfer vehicle carrying 8 of those payloads, 5 of which will be deployed at a later time. To date, SpaceX has launched more than 1,000 smallsats for 130-plus customers across their entire rideshare program. On board this mission are well-known company names. 4 satellites, 2 Terran orbital spacecrafts, and Planet Labs' first hyperspectral satellite were all on board. We'll bring you updates on the payload deployments on next week's show once we have confirmation of their operations.
And yesterday, SpaceX launched 2 Maxar satellites from Florida. Maxar have confirmed that its 3rd and 4th WorldView Legion satellites are performing well after deployment. The satellites are successfully communicating with Maxar's ground teams. They're now going through the commissioning process, with the first images expected in the early fall.
The ISS National Lab and NASA are collaborating on a solicitation for space-based research. The National Lab Research Announcement, known as NLRA, is calling for science in space to cure disease on Earth and is released in partnership with NASA's Biological and Physical Sciences Division. This NLRA will offer up to $4 million in total funding for an expected 2 to 3 awards for multi-flight, translational, and transformative research and technology development. A list of topics that are of particular interest to the NLRA are included in the press release in our show notes.
AZ Opportunity Fund has acquired 31.7 acres of industrial and retail land in Colorado Springs for the creation of the Colorado Aerospace Business Center known as the CABC. The CABC will serve as a hub for aerospace companies of all stages of growth alongside traditional users of industrial space. The site has a potential for over 320,000 square feet of industrial properties, supported by multiple retail pads. Site preparations for Phase 1 of the project is anticipated for later this month, with core and shell completion by the second quarter of 2025. Phase 1 will be built on speculation with the goal of having tenants operational by or before January 2026.
Rocket Lab has packed and shipped 2 Mars-bound spacecraft to Cape Canaveral in preparation for launch. The twin spacecraft for the Escape and Plasma Acceleration and Dynamics Explorers heliophysics mission known as Escapade were designed, built, integrated, and tested by Rocket Lab for the University of California, Berkeley's Space Science Laboratory and NASA. Once launched, the Escapade mission will measure plasma and magnetic fields around the red planet. The vehicles are expected to launch on Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket.
Lunar Outpost is collaborating with Castrol, yes, the supplier of vehicle lubricants, on its Mission Control Center for its Lunar Voyager 1 mission. The collaboration is part of Castrol's initiative called Castronomy, which I have to say I thought was food-related, which promotes advancements in space mobility through collaborations with innovators. The goal of the collaboration between Lunar Outpost and Castrol is to maximize operational success through an evolution of standard mission control. Lunar Outpost's LV-1 mission plans to land at Shackleton Connecting Ridge near the lunar South Pole aboard Intuitive Machines' Nova Sea lander, which is planned for later this year. The mobile autonomous prospecting platform rover, known as MAP, is aiming to be the first to travel to this previously unexplored region of the Moon. The Mission Control Center will be the nexus of planning, decision-making, and control during the traverse.
The European Space Agency's Space Solutions Group and the UK Space Agency are seeking proposals for innovative projects aimed at enhancing health infrastructure using space technology and data to support disaster response, telemedicine, and health systems efficiently. Winning proposals will be funded by the UK Space Agency with support from ESA. More details about the solicitation can be found by following the link in our show notes.
That concludes our Friday briefing. We'll be back on Monday with more headlines from the space industry from across the spaceship Earth. You can find out more about all the stories we've mentioned throughout this program by following the links in the selected reading section of our show notes. We've also included a piece from The Verge on the invisible problem with sending people to Mars.
Hey T-Minus crew, tune in tomorrow for T-Minus Deep Space, which is our show for extended interviews, special editions, and deep dives with some of the most influential professionals in the space industry. And tomorrow we have Dr. Anna Fisher talking about being part of the first space debris mission with NASA and being the first mom in space. Check it out while you're watching the kids at their sports practice, doing the obligatory grocery store run, or simply relaxing after yet another crazy week. We can absolutely relate. You don't want to miss it.
The Space Traffic Report is brought to you by our partners at nasaspaceflight.com. Alicia Siegel brings us a look at the space launch updates from the week that's been and a look ahead at the week to come.
I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and this is your weekly Space Traffic Report for T-Minus Space. Starting off the week, we had the launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket on August 10th at 12:50 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida. The mission was carrying 21 Starlink satellites, 13 of which were direct-to-cell and 8 of which were V2 mini satellites. The first stage for this mission was a veteran one, B-1067, flying for a 21st time on this mission and becoming just the third booster to do so. It successfully returned to Earth, landing on the deck of SpaceX's drone ship Just Read the Instructions. Going all the way to the other side of the globe, we had an Electron from Rocket Lab lifting off on August 11th at 13:18 UTC from the company's private spaceport in New Zealand. The rocket was carrying the Acadia 3 satellite for Capella Space into low Earth orbit. Acadia 3 is the latest satellite of Capella Space's constellation of Acadia Earth observation satellites. These observe the Earth using synthetic aperture radar imaging, also known as SAR, which is why Rocket Lab called this mission a sky full of SARs. This is the 5th Electron launch for Capella, with more to come in the near future. With this launch, Rocket Lab has now launched 10 times this year, matching the company's record for most launches in a given year, which was set in 2023. After Electron, we had 2 back-to-back Falcon 9 launches. Liftoff of the first took place on August 12th at 2:02 UTC from Space Launch Complex 4 East in California. The mission was carrying 2 broadband communication satellites into a Molniya transfer orbit. The satellites are part of the Space Norway Arctic Satellite Broadband constellation, meant to bring broadband connectivity to the Arctic regions of the Earth. In order to do this, the satellites can't be orbiting in a geostationary orbit because that would impede them from seeing the Arctic regions of the globe. Instead, they'll be orbiting Earth in a Molniya orbit, a highly elliptical, highly inclined orbit around the Earth that brings the satellites to a high altitude above the Arctic. In this type of orbit, the satellites spend most of their time near that highest point of their orbit and very little time near their closest point to Earth on their orbit. This means that while they will not always see the Arctic, they will do it for a prolonged period of time. By having 2 of these satellites phased such that one is high above when the other is down below, it allows for constant coverage all day long. Now, this type of orbit and coverage is, of course, of interest, not just for simple broadband connectivity, but also for the Norwegian military. While the 2 satellites are owned by Space Norway, a government-owned civil space company, the satellites were manufactured by Northrop Grumman and host payloads for the Norwegian Ministry of Defense. The U.S. Space Force also has payloads on board these satellites as a partnership between the military agencies of both countries. On top of that, they also have a communications payload from Viasat and a radiation monitor for the European Commission. The booster for this mission was another veteran, B-1061, which was flying for a 22nd time, therefore matching the current record for most flights achieved by a Falcon booster. B-1061 successfully returned to Earth, landing on SpaceX's drone ship Of Course I Still Love You. Just a few hours later, we had another Falcon 9 launch taking place from Launch Complex 39A in Florida. Liftoff of the Starlink Group 10-7 mission happened on August 12th at 10:37 UTC, and it carried another batch of 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board. The first stage for this mission, B-1073, was flying for a 17th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship A Short Fall of Gravitas. With the Starlink launches this week, SpaceX has now launched a total of 6,895 Starlink satellites, of which 559 have re-entered and 5,792 have moved into their operational orbit. And just yesterday morning, we had another 2 launches back-to-back, but from different rockets from different parts of the world. From Kazakhstan, we had the launch of a Soyuz 2.1A rocket carrying the Progress MS-28 cargo spacecraft on its way to the International Space Station. Liftoff took place on August 15th at 3:20 UTC from Site 316 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. On board the spacecraft are 2,621 kilograms of cargo, of which 1,420 kilograms consist of propellant for the station's propulsion system, drinking water for the crew, and nitrogen for atmosphere replenishment. Prior to this launch, the Progress MS-26 spacecraft undocked from the aft port of the station's Zvezda module on August 13th at about 2 o'clock UTC, leaving the docking port free for Progress MS-28 to dock to it this weekend. That docking is currently scheduled to take place on August 17th at 5:56 UTC. The spacecraft will then remain attached to the station for approximately 6 months before the end of its mission. The other launch featured another Falcon 9, the 4th this week, launching from Florida. Liftoff happened on August 15th at 1300 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40, carrying the 3rd and 4th WorldView Legion satellites into low Earth orbit. The WorldView Legion satellites are part of Maxar's latest constellation of Earth observation satellites. These are high-performing optical imaging satellites with a 34 centimeter per pixel resolution for panchromatic images and a 1.36 meter per pixel resolution for the 8 bands of multispectral imaging. This is the second out of 3 separate launches that SpaceX is carrying out in support of this constellation. The first 2 satellites were launched from Vandenberg into a sun-synchronous orbit, whereas the other 2 satellites were launched into a mid-inclination low Earth orbit. The next and last pair of satellites for this constellation will also launch from the Cape later this year into a mid-inclination low Earth orbit. This distribution of satellites allows Maxar to obtain images through multiple repeated passes of a certain location during different times of the day and in different illumination conditions. This mission featured another flight-proven booster, B-1076, flying on its 16th mission. It successfully returned for a land landing at SpaceX's Landing Zone 1, sending sonic booms all across the Space Coast. Now, there were potentially 2 other missions that may have taken place prior to publication. These 2 missions involve an SSLV rocket from India and a Changzheng 2D rocket from China. Unfortunately, we can't predict the future just yet, so we'll cover those on our next Space Traffic Report. And going into next week, we'll have another Falcon 9 launch from Florida carrying a batch of Starlink satellites. The 4-hour launch window is set to open on August 20th at 9:20 UTC. And heading back to Vandenberg, another Falcon 9 will launch another batch of Starlink V2 Mini and direct-to-cell satellites. The roughly 4-hour launch window is set to open on August 21st at 8:47 UTC. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and that's your weekly Space Traffic Report. Now back to T-Space.
We'll be right back.
Most of our listeners who deal with legacy privileged access management products know they tend to be expensive, difficult to deploy, and hard to use. Keeper Security is the answer. Keeper's Zero Trust solution delivers password, secrets, and connection management in one easy-to-use platform. It's fast to deploy, agentless, clientless, and has no implementation fees. Plus, Keeper is FedRAMP authorized. That's why we trust Keeper to prevent breaches and gain full control over privileged users. Visit keeper.io/cyberwire to schedule a quick demo. That's keeper.io/cyberwire. And thanks to Keeper Security for supporting our podcast.
Welcome back. Remember NASA's Psyche mission? It launched in October 2023 and is on its way to study the metallic asteroid Psyche. The running theory about Psyche is that it might be the exposed core of a protoplanet. But the Webb Space Telescope took a look at Psyche recently, and its findings are basically saying not so fast with that theory. Webb recently spotted something unexpected on the asteroid's surface: hydrated minerals, including hydroxyl and possibly water. For a supposedly metal-rich asteroid, finding the signs of water was not on the bingo card. It's possible these minerals may have come from impacts with other water-rich space rocks, but if they're actually from inside Psyche, well, that kind of changes everything we thought we knew about this asteroid. If, big if, but still, if these hydrated minerals are internal, it could mean Psyche didn't form where we originally thought and might not even be as metallic as we've believed. Instead of being a leftover protoplanet core, Psyche might have started out much farther from the sun, beyond what's known as the snow line, where water could freeze and mix into forming bodies. This would make Psyche a lot more complicated and interesting than we ever imagined, but the uneven spread of these minerals across the asteroid's surface suggests that they might have come from random impacts and not from within. Lots to chew on there, but the real story will unfold when NASA's Psyche spacecraft reaches its destination at the asteroid herself in 2029. When it gets there and it finds that Psyche maybe isn't the solid metal core we expected, that discovery could shake up our whole understanding of how planets and other bodies formed in the solar system. Just another day in studying the cosmos, huh?
That's it for T-Minus for August the 16th, 2024, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of our podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like the show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send us an email to space@n2k.com.
We are privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth. Our associate producer is Liz Stokes. We are mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simon Petrella is our president, Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm your host, Maria Varmazis. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.
This September 18th and 19th in Denver, a tight community of leading experts is gathering to tackle the toughest cybersecurity challenges we face. It's happening at MWise, the unique conference built by practitioners for practitioners. Brought to you by Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, MWise features one-to-one access with industry experts and fresh insights into the topics that matter most, right now, to frontline practitioners. Register early and save at mwise.io/cyberwire. That's mwise.io/cyberwire.